Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you are new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because today, we are talking about something that happens to all of us, and that is why small things make us disproportionately angry. Like, why is it that you can't handle major life stressors with relative calm but then you completely lose it when someone chews too loudly? Or when your phone charger stops working, or when someone does not use their turn signal and suddenly you are filled with rage. That seems way out of proportion to what actually happened, so let us dive into the fascinating psychology and neuroscience behind why minor annoyances can trigger major emotional reactions. Because understanding this can help us manage our anger better and be more compassionate with ourselves when we have these seemingly irrational outbursts. The first thing to understand is that anger at small things is rarely actually about the small thing itself, but rather it is the result of accumulated stress and tension that has been building up over time. And the small thing is just the final straw that breaks the camel's back, and this is what psychologists call stress accumulation, where you experience multiple stressors throughout the day or week and you manage to keep you're cool through all of them, but each one adds to your internal stress load, and eventually your capacity to regulate your emotions becomes depleted, and then something tiny happens. And all that pent-up stress and frustration comes pouring out, and it looks like you are overreacting to a minor issue, but really you are reacting to everything that came before it as well. The concept of ego depletion is really important here, because our ability to control our emotions and regulate our responses is like a muscle that gets tired with use and throughout the day every time you have to resist an impulse, make a decision, manage your emotions, or exercise self-control. You are using up your mental and emotional energy, and by the end of a long stressful day, your capacity for emotional regulation is depleted, and this is why you are much more likely to snap at small things in the evening than you are in the morning, when you are fresh and your self-control reserves are full. And this is also why people who are dealing with chronic stress, sleep deprivation, or difficult life circumstances tend to have shorter fuses, because they are operating with depleted resources all the time. Lack of control is another major factor that makes small things feel infuriating. Because humans have a deep psychological need to feel like they have some control over their environment and their lives, and when we face big uncontrollable problems, like economic uncertainty, health issues, relationship troubles, or work stress, we often cannot do anything about them directly, and this creates a sense of powerlessness and frustration. And when something small and annoying happens, it becomes a target for all that frustration. Because even though we cannot control the big things, we feel like we should be able to control the small things, like whether our technology works properly or whether people follow basic social etiquette. And when we cannot even control these minor aspects of life, it feels like the final insult and triggers intense anger. Sensory overload also plays a significant role, especially in our modern world, where we are constantly bombarded with stimulation from screens, notifications, traffic noise, crowds, and endless demands on our attention. And when your nervous system is already overwhelmed by sensory input, even a small additional irritation can push you over the edge into anger, because your system is maxed out and cannot handle one more thing. And this is why people who are highly sensitive or who have conditions like autism, ADHD, or anxiety often have particularly strong reactions to small annoyances, because their nervous systems are more easily overwhelmed, and they have less capacity to tolerate additional irritation. The violation of expectations is a powerful trigger for anger at small things, because we all have internal models of how the world should work and how people should behave, and when reality does not match our expectations, it creates cognitive dissonance and frustration, and small annoyances often involve violations of these basic expectations, like expecting technology to work, expecting people to be considerate, expecting things to be where you left them, and when these reasonable expectations are violated, it feels unjust and unfair, which triggers anger, and a smaller and more avoidable the violation seems, the more angry we get, because it feels like it should not have happened and someone or something is to blame. Displacement is a psychological defense mechanism where we redirect our emotions from their real source to a safer target, and this happens all the time. With anger, because we might be angry at our boss, but we cannot express that anger directly without consequences. So instead we come home and yell at our partner or our kids, or we rage at the slow internet or the traffic, and the small thing becomes a safe outlet for anger that really belongs elsewhere, and while this might provide temporary relief, it does not actually address the real source of the anger, and it can damage our relationships and our well-being. Sleep deprivation is one of the most underestimated factors in anger at small things, because lack of sleep severely impairs the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, rational thinking, and impulse control, and it also increases activity in the amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain, particularly for processing threat and negative emotions. So when you are sleep deprived, you literally have less ability to control your anger and a heightened tendency to perceive things as threatening or annoying, and this is why everything seems more irritating when you are tired, and why parents of young children or people with insomnia often find themselves getting angry at the smallest things. Hunger and blood sugar fluctuations also dramatically affect our emotional regulation, which is why the term hangry exists, because when your blood sugar drops, your brain does not have the glucose it needs to function optimally, and this particularly affects the prefrontal cortex and your ability to manage your emotions. And low blood sugar also triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which put your body in a state of physiological arousal that makes you more reactive and irritable, and this is why you might find yourself getting irrationally angry at small things when you have not eaten in several hours, and why eating something can almost immediately improve your mood. Pain and physical discomfort, whether from chronic conditions, acute injuries, tension, headaches, or just sitting in an uncomfortable position all day, create a constant background stressor that depletes your emotional resources and makes you more reactive to small annoyances, because when you are in pain, your nervous system is already in a state of heightened arousal, and you have less capacity to tolerate additional irritation, and many people do not realize how much chronic low-level pain affects their mood and their anger responses until they address the pain and notice how much calmer they feel. The illusion of catastrophe is a cognitive distortion where we unconsciously treat small annoyances as if they are major threats, and this happens because our brains are wired with a negativity bias that made our ancestors more likely to survive by assuming the worst and responding to potential threats with urgency. And while this served us well when we were facing actual physical dangers, it means that in the modern world, our brains can treat a slow-loading web page or a person cutting in line as if it is a genuine threat to our survival. And this triggers the fight or flight response with all its associated physiological arousal, including the emotion of anger, which is fundamentally a fight response. Lack of meaning or purpose in our daily lives can also make small annoyances feel more significant, because when we are engaged in work or activities that feel meaningful and fulfilling, we have more resilience and perspective, and minor irritations roll off our backs more easily. But when we feel like we are just going through the motions without any real purpose or satisfaction, those same small annoyances can feel like yet another example of how pointless and frustrating life is, and they trigger disproportionate anger because they symbolize our larger dissatisfaction, even though we might not consciously recognize this connection. Perfectionism and rigid thinking also contribute to anger at small things, because perfectionists have very high standards for how things should be, and very low tolerance for deviation from those standards, and when reality inevitably falls short, whether because someone makes a mistake, something breaks, or things just do not go according to plan, perfectionists experience intense frustration and anger, and similarly, people who have rigid black and white thinking struggle when things are messy, ambiguous, or imperfect, which describes most of life, and this inflexibility makes them more prone to anger when encountering the inevitable small imperfections and annoyances of daily existence. Past trauma, particularly developmental trauma, can also make people more reactive to small triggers, because trauma changes the nervous system, making it more sensitive to perceived threats. And if you grew up in an environment where you had to be hypervigilant to stay safe, or where small things could escalate into big dangerous situations, your nervous system learned to treat small annoyances as potential threats that require an immediate strong response. And even years later, when you are in a safe environment, your nervous system might still react with intense anger to small things, because that is what it learned to do to protect you. And this is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system that is doing exactly what it was trained to do, even though it is no longer adaptive. Social contagion of anger is also worth mentioning, because anger is highly contagious, and when we are surrounded by other people who are irritable, stressed, and reactive, whether at work, in our families, or in the broader culture, we tend to absorb that energy and become more reactive ourselves. And this is especially true in our current era, where we are constantly exposed through social media and news to people expressing outrage and anger about everything, and this chronic exposure to anger lowers our threshold for our own anger responses and normalizes getting angry at small things. The lack of emotional awareness and literacy also contributes, because many people were never taught to identify their emotions, understand what triggers them, or develop healthy ways to express and regulate them. So when they feel angry, they do not have the skills to pause and ask what is really going on, or to address the root cause. Instead, they just react automatically to whatever triggered the feeling. And small things become the target simply because they are there, and they are easier to focus on than doing the harder work of examining what is really bothering us. So what can we do about getting angry at small things? Well, the first step is awareness, recognizing when you are having a disproportionate reaction, and getting curious about what might really be going on rather than just reacting automatically. And some practical strategies include addressing basic needs like sleep, nutrition, and physical comfort, because when your body is well-resourced, you have much more capacity for emotional regulation. And developing a regular stress management practice, whether that is exercise, meditation, yoga, journaling, or therapy, can help you process the bigger stressors so they do not accumulate and explode over small things. And learning to pause between the trigger and your response, even for just a few seconds, gives your prefrontal cortex a chance to come back online and choose a more measured response. And practicing self-compassion and recognizing that everyone gets irrationally angry sometimes, and that does not make you a bad person, it makes you human. And when you do snap at something small, you can apologize if you affected others, and use it as information about what you need to address in your life. Whether that is more rest, better boundaries, less stress, or support with bigger issues. The bottom line is that anger at small things is usually a symptom of something bigger, whether that is accumulated stress, depleted resources, unmet needs, or unaddressed problems. And rather than judging yourself for having these reactions, you can use them as valuable information that tells you something in your life needs attention. And when you address those underlying issues, you will find that you have much more resilience and patience for the inevitable small annoyances that are just part of being alive. So there you have it, the real reasons why small things can make us so angry. And I hope this has given you some insight and some compassion for yourself when you have these reactions. And remember, you are not alone in this. Everyone struggles with this at times. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more psychology content, and let me know in the comments what small things trigger you the most. Because I bet we will all find we have more in common than we think. And until next time, be kind to yourself. Take care of your needs, and remember that your anger is information, not a character flaw. So take care, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.